Hi guys, my name is Ronlyn. I'm your host and welcome to another episode of I.N.T.E.N.T. Today we are going to be discussing the importance of traditional culture, specifically native language, also known as mother tongue. And I have Aviwe from Eduvanced Tutors that's going to be discussing this with us. Hi Aviwe.
Hi, Ronlyn. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, and thanks for agreeing again to be on the podcast. Just for our listeners, Aviva and I just had a brief discussion because we're not really acquainted. Um, so we just had a brief discussion on who we are, what drove us towards with her Eduvanced Tutors and with me the podcast, and in the words of Aviwe, alignment. That's what I got out of our mini conversation. It's just alignment, and just if you if you feel the need to do something, if it is your passion, go with it, because you never know who you're going to inspire, including yourself, and what sort of change you are going to make in this world. So thank you for that mini conversation, Abiwe.
Mhm. That's so true. Alignment.
Yeah, yes. So Avive, you can just give a brief background on Eduvanced Tutors and what it is and why it exists.
All right. So, Eduvanced is a language services company. So, we specialize in teaching languages, promoting languages, mainly isiXhosa, and also the translation of languages. So we exist because we live in one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world. And yet, so many people feel excluded or like misunderstood or unable to participate in simple things or day to day things because of language. So, we
Mm.
understood that, understanding each other's languages is almost like building a bridge where there was previously a barrier. So we want to build the bridges using language among people and among people in our diverse society. So we said, let's
Mm.
start with isiXhosa, teaching isiXhosa. Real conversations, just basic conversational isiXhosa is where we started. Just getting people to connect with people in more meaningful ways. And then we went on to do translations because we understood that there was a gap in accurate translations of native languages. Sometimes it's translated literally and it does not carry that meaning. So that's what we do. We work with
Mm.
individuals who want to be a part of the Rainbow Nation and a part of diversity. So that can be interracial or intercultural families. It could be individuals, corporate leaders, corporate teams. So it's anyone who wants to communicate with people beyond just the norm. So basically, going the extra mile and communicating with people in a language that's close to home for them, which is usually their mother
Mm.
tongue or the native languages. So, in essence, that's what we do.
Wonderful. And can you also explain the reason? Because I remember when I sent you, the structure of what's going to be discussed, you said that this is very close to home.
Yes.
Yes, is what is the personal aspect behind it?
Yes. So personally, I am Xhosa. My home language is a Xhosa, and it's close to home for me, especially to teach and promote languages and to preserve our languages, is because we are losing so much of our culture, and so many people are being excluded in important conversations because of the language barrier that we have, or because native languages have been seen as something that is not relevant or that isn't involved in modern society or in the Western world. So for me, I think to me it comes back to home because I really want to be able to be the one to, make sure that we continue to advocate for things like our languages and our cultures and to make sure that they live on or they grow with time as well.
And that is very important in the time that we live in, where there's not as many people that are practicing their home language, whether
Yeah.
it's at home or whether it's at work or whether, in any space. The medium
Yeah.
language is English. So
Yes.
so your platform is very important. I just want to speak about language as a whole, like
Yeah.
the meaning behind language, just for listeners to understand how important this concept is, because it's a method of communication. So we
Yeah.
need this method of communication in order to interact and communicate our needs and wants. As you mentioned, you are bridging the gap in terms of communication by offering these services so that people are
Yeah.
able to interact and communicate their needs and wants. So I
Yeah.
want to speak specifically now about native languages in
Mm.
terms of holding on to our cultural roots. So we can start by our upbringing.
Yeah.
How important is it, for example, a 2-year old, a child that just started learning how to speak, to know their native language, even if it means just understanding?
Yeah. I think language is more than just what we communicate or speak. And I think, you know,
Mm,
language is what makes you a part of a specific community. It's how we learn to greet, it's how we learn how to show respect, to express love, or to apologize, or just to connect with people.
mm,
So, for example, when children do not learn the mother tongue or their native language at a young age, they almost become disassociated from that community. In as much as they
mm,
will always be accommodated, and you'll see we accommodate a lot, but they won't be a part of that community because language shapes everything. The way you think, the values that you come up with, those are all instilled by language, and in essence, the community that you come from. So it
mm,
almost takes away that sense, so to speak.
mm. The sense of belonging. I'm so happy that
Belonging, yeah,
community. I'm so happy that you mentioned that it's more than language, because a lot of
yeah,
people think that language is just, as I stated before, just communication. When it is abroad, there's much more to it.
yes,
Um, so, in terms of foundation phase, you spoke
yes,
about the fact that language is not just about communication, it's also, it has influences of love, sense of belonging, connection to community, identity.
yeah,
Um, what in your field, in your experience, I'm not sure, the age group that you've dealt with, but as young as when they're learning how to speak, what
yes.
impact does it
Mhm.
have for them to be communicating in their mother tongue? For example, at school, at home, in various contexts.
Yeah. Um, I love the fact that you asked about age groups because we work with all age groups. And, I think children are the most fascinating because we underestimate how much they are able to, absorb knowledge and to learn. So when it
Mm,
comes to children who are multilingual or who understand, how to um, either know their mother tongue as well as, for example, English or other additional languages. I've seen them thrive because for them, it's almost as if it opens up their mind a little bit more to understand, concepts from their, I'm going to say, community, for example, like respect. I'll give an example in the Xhosa culture. There's a way, or
mm,
there's certain words that we use with adults, and there's certain words that we don't use with adults. So when they are exposed to that, they kind of also assimilate that in everything that they do, or they're more inquisitive about, okay, how do I show respect in this language, or how do I do a certain thing when I move it to a language that's not my mother language? So
mm,
yeah, I think with children, it's quite important that they are instilled with both their mother language and additional languages, and it's in fact a powerful tool that you can give them in that sense.
I love the fact that you mentioned, in terms of communication and different cultures, you communicate with different age groups differently.
Yeah.
So, in terms of modern day, where, for example, parents, I'm going to
Hmm.
speak personally as a parent, where
Yeah.
we don't have the same community we had compared to when we were growing up.
Yes.
There's no extended family. A lot of us live out of our hometowns, for example, the suburbs, where we don't have a strong support structure in terms of family, external family, friends we grew up with. There's that sense of
Yeah.
community. We don't have that in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And how do we how do we teach our kids our mother tongue when it's more than just teaching them the words? It's more than
Yeah.
dialect. It's I had this conversation with one of the ladies that I know that's living in America, where she was
Yeah.
explaining the challenges of teaching her kids her mother language because there's
Yeah.
nobody else around her that speaks it. So
Mhm.
emphasizing to other people that it's more than dialect, it's body language. It's learning how to
Yeah.
communicate with um, different age groups, and the male, the female, you communicate differently. So how do we
Yeah.
bridge that gap?
Yeah. I think it starts by being intentional. The community aspect is so vital when it comes to, how a child is raised and brought up. Now, at the absence of that, it requires a lot more effort and a lot more being intentional of saying, you know what, whether they, resist in the beginning or whether they take to it or not, I'm still going to be
Mm,
intentional about, teaching them my mother tongue or, my home language. It's even
mm,
in, where children now come into, for example, mixed cultural families. Both
yes.
parents need to be intentional on, whose language will they take and will they learn later on, So it's all about being intentional. And, with children, I also do work a lot with children. I mean, I have a 4-year old who
Mm,
I worked with it since 2 years ago. She's in grade 1 now. And it's more about being intentional. She knows that when she's speaking with Aviwe, she needs to try and give her best and is a closer. Then when she goes to school in the
mm,
playground, then she can speak English. You know what I mean? So it's
mm,
making it fun for them, being more intentional, and almost giving them that it's like switching on that light bulb in their head that, you know what, this is also important. You also need to do this, or you also need to be able to communicate in another language, in your home language. And it's actually a good thing. So another thing that most parents will do is make it frustrating for children because I understand, sometimes teaching them, language, especially explaining things like nuances that come with learning a language that's different from what they're taught at school, it does get frustrating.
mm,
But that usually starts creating that, that resistance to learning a language and builds up. So I think make it intentional, be intentional about saying, you know what, we will try. And you'll see a little effort, a little consistency goes a long way.
mm. And I also did some research in terms of the correlation between academic performance and confidence in kids that are taught in their native language or that are bilingual and multilingual. I think you did speak briefly about the impact that it has on kids. Are you able to speak
Mhm.
more about it from
Yeah,
your
I think
experience?
in my experience, children who are multilingual tend to understand that there's more than one way to problem solve. They're already
Mm,
open to the idea that, there's more than one option to doing things like a language. So they are more programmed to understand, things like problem solving. They're more open to things like, making friends and connections with people, which might be a small thing, but it's very important, even in academic development, to have that sense of, building relations with other people. So I think it's very important because, um, that's how they'll excel. It's them building comprehensional skills, being able to
mm,
understand that, there's more than one way to solve something. Yeah, I think in my
mm,
experience, in a nutshell, that will be it.
mm. Because I even had a
And your side, what?
conversation.
Yeah,
Hmm? Sorry?
yeah. I was just gonna get your take and your view on that.
On the correlation. with academic performance and confidence.
Yes.
Yes, I do believe that there is a direct influence. I mean, I don't know, to me it's quite obvious that if you are fluent in a language that you were brought up in, as we spoke about, the fact that there's more to language than just communication. It's a sense of belonging,
Mhm.
identity. When you are rooted in who you are, by nature, you become more confident. You're not swayed
Mhm.
by the perception of others, or you're not easily
Yeah.
influenced. So that's a big factor in terms of, the upbringing of kids, because we don't want them to be
Yeah.
influenced in the wrong way. So
Mhm.
pouring into them in terms of um, their traditional culture helps them stay rooted and grounded. No matter what obstacle they are faced with, they're able to persevere because they know who they are. And as you said, it
Yeah.
also helps with problem solving in that sense. So no matter, even if
Yeah.
they move away from home or even out of the country, they still have that sense of, this is who I am. I'm not going to go against my values and morals in
Yeah.
order to get to where I want to be. And
Mm.
they're going to make sure that they problem solve in a way that isn't going to go against that. Even in terms of creativity, it broadens the mind. There's scientific research regarding people that are bilingual and multilingual, that it in terms of the brain, there's a certain part of the brain that is activated more. So they are considered more creative. They
Yeah.
have better memory, better problem solving. They're able to adapt better because by default you are adapting. When you are
True.
when you are around certain people, you are speaking in a certain dialect. You are behaving in a certain way when you're speaking compared to another group. So you're constantly adapting. Um, and to me, it's an advantage. With me personally, I'm one of those that my mother tongue is English. So I only speak English, but I've made it a choice to learn other languages, especially in the profession
Yeah.
that I'm in, where I need to understand other languages. My only issue, or my only challenge, should I say, is speaking it. That's something that
Uh-huh.
I need to be very intentional about.
You've already got you halfway there, or more than halfway there. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So that's my take in terms of the importance of
Yeah.
different languages, staying rooted to our culture, also learning other cultures. I mean, we don't live
Mhm.
alone, we live amongst others. So we need to also understand human behavior in general. So it
Yeah.
should start at foundation phase, where if you know we in South Africa we have multilingual schools, multicultural schools. So it would help if at a foundation phase it's already implemented, where when a
Yeah.
child is interacting at a school or even at a mall, they're able to understand, no, my friend is interacting with their parents in that way because it's part of their culture. Therefore, when I'm at
Yeah.
their house, I behave in this way because I'm respecting their home, I'm respecting their parents, I'm respecting their culture, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate with that so much. And I think on so many of those, you spot on, being able to understand and respect other people's cultures beyond just your own, and going that extra mile to understand people. Yeah. And I love
Mm,
the point that you mentioned about them knowing who they are so that they aren't, easily swayed. I
yes,
cannot agree with you more on that. Yeah.
yes, yes. I mean, even if we have to think back to, I'm going to speak about Africa because we are African, countries that were oppressed. One of the first things that were taken away was identity, which is native
Yeah.
language, because of the importance of that. When you strip away someone's identity, you can make them who they want to be. So it's
Yeah.
very important for us as human beings to still keep that intact.
Yeah.
especially as parents, as guardians, aunts, uncles, grandparents, um, to instill that in the younger generation, not to lose the identity, no matter what. I mean, you can be
Yeah.
living on an island somewhere else where, the culture is completely different, but you need to stay true to yourself. Um,
True.
yeah, I don't think now when I'm speaking about it, the impact of language is actually huge. It is huge. Even when you think about
Yeah.
our schooling system, the fact that only now are native languages being incorporated um, on more into schools. It's being incorporated only now, when it should have been,
Yeah.
long ago, because it impacts a child's learning, the
Yeah.
ability to learn, as you said, the ability to understand certain concepts. On that note,
Yeah.
I also wanted to clarify in terms of translation. For example,
Hmm.
translating English into a native language. Is there a way of translating every concept into a native language and vice versa, where it doesn't change the meaning? I know it might seem
I
like
think.
you know, a not so intelligent
Yeah.
question, but
No.
this is something that has sparked conversation. So I want to clarify
Yeah.
from a professional point of view, because in my opinion, I think it's totally possible that any language can be translated into another language. Um, but I
Yeah.
just want to hear from you on a technical level.
Yeah. I think it's possible. And I think with, the whole AI movement, it's possible. However, with the indigenous languages in South Africa, number one, there's a lot
Mm,
of similarities. For example, in the Nguni languages, you might not know which language you are translating between Swati, Ndebele, Zulu, and Xhosa, there's too many
mm,
similarities. Another thing is with our languages, one word can have probably 8 meanings, and
yeah.
those will all be context related. It's not even
Mm,
just because, yeah. So it's possible. It's just, in order for it to be accurate, it needs to still maintain the context that it was, spoken in, and what you meant. For example, there's words like ubulele, which could either mean did you sleep, did you kill, did you say thank you, so translating those in a cookie cutter way is very difficult if you don't have context or a little bit more understanding around this. But
mm,
it's possible, yes. And
it is.
ultimately, that's
Mm,
what we aim, um, or we want to see in the near future being possible,
mm,
similar to like how other languages are easily translated.
yes. Yes.
Because we're still translating to English, we still need to translate it to other languages.
Mm,
So yeah.
mm. So eventually, in an ideal world, eventually in every industry, um, a person can go in and be assisted in their home language, whether it's the schooling system, whether it's IT, whether it's corporate construction, they can be assisted in their home language in terms of documentation.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
That's the aim.
In order, it's access and inclusion. If we have
Mm,
not reached that as yet, so therefore we can't say we're fully inclusive, or everyone has
mm,
access to everything, unless
mm.
language does that. So
Yes. So we need to be
unless it's
intentional about it.
recognized.
Mm.
Yeah, 100%.
You were saying because it's recognized?
So when it's recognized in that way, or when it's advanced or developed in that way to adapt to different industries, to different even in a school context, if we can
Mm,
start with that, I think that would be a lot of inclusivity, and it will make things
mm,
like education inclusive and accessible,
mm,
or easier for
mm,
everyone. Whereas I'll just take up the education system. There's children who first need to learn English before they can learn mathematics, before they can,
Mm,
do something simple as that.
mm,
Whereas, if it was easy to translate those two things, I'm sure they'd spend less time translating in their minds on their own and probably just getting to
yes.
what will get them to succeed.
Yes. Because it's very stressful for somebody
Yeah,
being taught in a language that they aren't familiar with. It's extremely stressful and it's
yeah,
also discouraging. Like, why do I have to sit
yeah,
here and endure this? I can be at home, you
yeah,
know? And already there are
yeah,
kids that are worse off before they even step foot in the schooling system because already they're like, oh my gosh, now I need to go in there. I need to learn another language. I need to translate it in my head, and it's contextual.
yeah,
So I need help from somebody else. And for example, if it's mathematics, then I have to apply it there, and then it's just it's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
It is a lot. So the inequality is, yeah, it should not be like this. It should
yeah,
not, because already, as I said, kids are worst off before they even step foot in the schooling system. So hopefully,
oh
in
yes,
terms of incorporating more native language in the schooling system, because that's where it all starts.
yeah,
Hopefully that would move faster, especially with services like yours.
yeah. I think
Mm.
even just not leaving it up to parents on their own, everyone has a role to play. I think
Mm.
what communities used to look like back then will look different for us now. Teachers, I have a lot of teachers who come and say, you know what, I don't need IsiXhosa to do anything, but I have a child in my class where I want to be able to communicate with them and help them more. And I know if I can speak to him in IsiXhosa, it will help. And we've seen so much of a difference and an impact that has had on them. So I think everyone can take it upon themselves to say, we're not waiting for a miracle or, something that will come from the top down. I think even as
Mm.
individuals, we can play our part and you know, working towards that, or at least attempting to try and work towards that.
Mm. Yes, we definitely can. What would that look like practically? Like in terms of having programs in communities? Like for
Hmm.
example, like your company, Eduvanced Tutors, um, going out into communities, making them aware of the services, or schools, or like what would that look like practically?
I think in terms of awareness, we could do our part in terms of awareness, but where the
Mm.
relevance and demand is not created, it becomes a meaningless attempt. For example, if I'll just give in a schooling setting. If parents aren't angry enough that there isn't, an indigenous language part of the subject, then that school won't feel the need to include it, because there is no demand. I think it would, like I said, it would need to start with individuals. I also have another problem whereby, in order for a child to get into grade one in like a very nice school, they need to have a certain type of English. And usually they start getting discouraged and saying, what, talk to this child in English. Don't confuse the child, speak to them in English so that they can get a nice school. And from there on, we now start having adults who don't know their mother tongue. And it's not their fault. It was because, the schooling system made it seem like to have your mother tongue is going to set you back. So maybe even advocating for
Mm.
things like that and, even doing our own work in the background, as individuals, as aunts, as mothers, as, you know, people in the community. And then from there on, as Eduvance, we take over and, that's where our services now start having more impact when they are more
Mm.
um, relevant, where people are more open to receiving them. Um, yeah. So currently we're playing both those roles, creating, the awareness and also providing the services. So
Mm. Okay. 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 Because for me as a parent, I would think that in terms of incorporating, different languages, even in the household, for me, the easiest thing is songs. Through songs, songs
Yes.
unite people. Through games, um, I think that can be incorporated in a lot of households and communities. Just simple things
Mhm.
like that. Songs, as a South African nation, we love dancing, we love good times, we
We
love a
do.
party. So it unites
We
us.
do. And it brings us together.
Yes. Yeah, so
Mm.
that needs to come
Yeah.
back, that sense of Ubuntu. I was having this conversation last night. That sense of Ubuntu, it needs to come back where everyone is so keen
Mhm.
on learning from each other. Because
Yes.
somehow it's being lost, and we can see it in this
Yeah.
generation now. The what do they call it? Not Gen Z, the Gen Alphas, even a bit of the Gen
Mm.
Zs, those born in the
Yeah.
2000s. You can see it,
Yes.
where most of them can't speak their home language, or they don't know anything about their culture, or they're not even interested. So
Then yeah.
bridging that gap, I feel on the simplest form would be language.
Hmm. I agree.
Would be language, on the simplest form. Because a lot of kids, the aim, I think even with us, the aim was, oh my gosh, we're gonna go to America, or we're gonna go to the UK, and that was the dream. And yeah,
Yeah.
for some people, their perception has changed a lot. As you grow,
Yeah.
there's a lot more to just relocating. But even in that
Yeah.
sense, if you're relocating out of South Africa or out of Africa, and just say you're one of those people that wants nothing to do with their cultural roots. And then you meet other people from other cultures that are bragging about their cultures and their language and trying to, educate others. And you are just there like, oh no, yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't resonate with me. It goes
Yeah.
back to that sense of belonging, that identity, losing yourself.
Yeah.
So,
100%. You know,
it, hmm?
sorry. I was going to say a huge, there's a phrase that I constantly hear, where people will say, what job will learning is a course I get you, or where will that take you? You know, and the way of thinking of that really worries me because it sometimes is not about what it can unlock for you or what you get access to, but it's actually just defining or just knowing who you are. And that's
Mm,
ultimately what it's about. We have people who are interested in our cultures and languages, and we are abandoning them. You know, that's worrying for me.
yes, yes, yes. Because also I believe that, as individuals, um, we sometimes we take on certain habits, not just physically, but um, certain traits from people in our family, whether they are alive or they're not alive. So, in order to
Yeah,
understand in terms of our Africanness, it's very important to actually understand your culture.
yeah,
Because sometimes you'll wonder, oh my gosh, why am I interested in this? Then you'll find out, no, maybe it was your grandmother that was just like you. You understand what
yeah,
I mean? Maybe even in terms
yeah,
of,
yeah,
with maybe your grandmother used to, educate the community. And that becomes even more of
yeah,
a driving force to say, oh my gosh, this is in my family, educating others,
yeah,
this to learn. And it becomes
yeah,
such a passion, and you pass it on to the next generation, just in terms of, looking for motivation. As they say, look within yourself. So it's important to also know,
yeah,
know culture. It's more than
yeah.
just,
I mean,
gosh, this is language, this is what we must do. it's way more than that.
Yeah, it is. I also I'm going to go back to culture because clearly you'll see the passion from that. But another thing that language does is keeping our cultures alive, keeping them relevant.
Mm,
Tradition and culture isn't something that's supposed to be rigid and, a practice that was done, by our forefathers then needs to be exactly the same. But, when we have language and we keep things like our language evolving, even with the
mm,
times, certain things like our cultures and our values can, be merged into modern times and could still be
mm,
relevant now. I feel like there's a disconnect with our languages being relevant in the next few years, and some people saying, "Oh, our languages are dying."
mm,
I think they pose a risk of dying when they aren't moving on with the times. They pose a risk of dying when we aren't nurturing them, or when
mm,
we stop becoming inquisitive and
mm.
working towards that. So, yeah. Or how do you feel about that in terms of our languages living on and cultures?
It's it's very important, as you said, in terms of that disconnect. It is apparent, like as we discussed, in terms of like the Gen Z generation, some of the Gen Alpha generation, where they can't understand the basics of their native language, or either they're not even interested because they've become so embodied by the Western culture, which is not necessarily a
Yeah,
bad thing because we do need to merge the two um, in order for
yeah,
it to evolve, which is very, very important. Um,
yeah,
it's just in terms of the resources which I feel would lie in your Gen Z, Gen Alpha generation, in terms of evolving the culture to a point where it doesn't die out. So because each generation thinks differently because of what we're exposed to. So, for instance, like
yeah.
with me, I'm considered a 1K, born in the early 90s.
Okay.
So, so
Okay.
my for what I was exposed to growing up was a mix of, you can say, your old school and your new modernized, internet generation. So in terms
Yeah.
of keeping our culture alive, it was for me, okay, I'm from Durban. Um, so it's just in
Okay.
terms of like little like language, like slang language or food that we eat, making sure,
Yeah.
my child is exposed to that. Certain
Okay.
certain things that we do that he's exposed to that. So we've merged the two
Yeah.
in terms of your old school and your new school. So in terms of like your Gen Alpha, okay, Gen
Yes.
Alphas are quite young, so Gen Z, they would need to do that in terms of what they are exposed to, and most of them, or I can say all of them, have been brought up in a very technology environment. So in
Mm.
terms of incorporating, their culture with technology in order for it to evolve. Um, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Passing on the baton. And especially
Yes,
with technology, things like AI and so forth, having to explain to the older generation what is AI and how to protect them from things like that. I think the baton has to
yes.
be passed on to the next generation to see how they can keep things like that, or, make sure that, that's still relevant or still speaks to people in a way that they can understand it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and the only way to do that is for them to be aware. That's why it's important in terms of cultural preservation to, as you were saying, passing on the knowledge to them in terms of, the customs and even, native stories, or even just sharing a story of how you
Yeah.
grew up, your experiences, whether they're good or bad, just passing it on to the next generation, even values, morals, so they can figure out how they
Mm.
can incorporate it um, in this culture of today. That would be the only way
Yeah.
forward for me. And you spoke about AI,
Yeah.
also implementing it into AI. I see a lot of people make these funny videos in terms of, like people in the
Yeah.
village, if that resonates with their culture or anything cultural. And that's also a form of awareness. People might find it funny, but also there are people that are curious and asking, oh, what is that person wearing? Why are they doing that? It sparks questions, which is also another
Yeah.
form
Yeah.
of creating that awareness. So that's just a typical example of how different generations can continue culture.
Yeah. I'm
So
taking
it's
away how you
basically,
say we can learn from the good and the bad stories. So, because
yes,
we don't have
yes.
to repeat the bad, we can learn.
Yes, I'm a firm believer that you have to state the good and the bad. You cannot only state the good just
Mm,
because, okay, this is my culture, they only need to know the good. No, there needs to be balance. Balance
mm,
in life is extremely
mm-hmm.
important on every level. So they need to know the good and the bad,
Yeah.
because when certain things happen and they're like, oh my gosh, maybe I did something wrong, and then there's that disconnect. Because by nature, with us
Yeah.
humans, when we get a negative reaction, almost our immediate response is disconnect. Maybe, if we
Yeah.
disconnect, it won't happen again. It's our immediate response.
Yeah.
Okay, we do get, stubborn humans. I think we all have a bit of stubbornness to us. We will be like, no, okay, let's change this. But if initially you knew that there's a possibility of this happening, you would problem solve. So it's important for
Yeah.
us to state the good
Yeah.
and the bad, and not only within our community or within our culture, but also with others, so they also know it's part of creating
Yeah.
awareness, part of educating. So we,
Yeah.
sorry, so we shouldn't just state, oh my gosh, our culture is the best because of A, B, C, and D. And then someone else brings up bad stuff, and you're just like, okay, I didn't know that. No, we need to, be
Yeah.
transparent in our in
Yeah.
our education. I know there are certain things when it comes to certain cultures that can't be disclosed, which is totally understandable. But just in terms of things that people should be aware of or can be made aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I think this was a fruitful discussion. I think some of the points that you've shared, I really resonate with them. Um, with coming from your perspective as well. I think, yeah, we really have a
Mm,
lot of work to do, but I love the fact it even starts with conversations like this, that
mm.
awareness, having these conversations and, being real with ourselves and saying, you know what, we have a lot to do, or, you know what, we probably didn't do as much in this sector, or what can be done. I think that's where it starts as well. So, yeah.
That is true. That is true. And it's also very big for me as the host that only speaks English, having a topic about us as individuals, learning other languages. So so that's why I
Look,
mentioned,
well,
taking accountability, and being more intentional on learning other languages. Um, I know for
mm,
some of us it takes a while, especially I know for me, if I'm not surrounded by a specific group of people, that are fluent in the language, if I'm not around them, I lose that
yeah,
muscle, um, like
yeah,
almost instantly. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I need to be around people who are conversating in the languages that I am trying to be more fluent in, and also speaking the languages. Yeah,
yeah.
because sometimes my clicks don't click right. Because as you were mentioning, when you speak the different languages, especially in Guni, where the clicks are different. Sometimes
Yeah.
your tongue needs to be in front, in the
Yeah.
middle, at the back. So technique.
You know what? The way you'll be embraced, and the way people are so open to being or feeling seen, when people speak their own, if someone speaks to me in Kosa, I feel more seen. I feel more like you had to go the extra
Mm,
mile to acknowledge me. So you'll see that you might be
yes.
worried about the click, and you could say the wrong click. On my side, I'll autocorrect that for you. And in fact, I just am embracing the moment that I'm feeling seen, that I'm being, recognized in my own language. Even if I'm speaking Zulu
Mm,
and you greet me in Xhosa, I think for me, it's you extending. It's like extending a hand, and saying, what, I want to
mm,
meet you halfway. I think for me,
mm.
you'll be surprised at how much, yeah. But yes, go for it.
No,
I think challenge yourself. Um,
yes,
mm,
no, it definitely in terms
yes.
of greeting, in terms of especially pronouncing names. When it comes to pronouncing names, I'm very particular because I strongly feel like people should go the extra mile when it comes to people's names. I don't care
Yeah,
what culture you're from or what's your mother tongue, but you should go the extra mile in pronouncing people's names. And I think it also comes from a personal point of view
yeah,
because people often mispronounce my name. So when other people make the
yeah,
name short or even my name short, I'm just like, but we don't know each other like that. Let's get acquainted correctly first. At least try and make the
yeah,
effort. But we are not shortening my name because I
yeah,
strongly feel like that is disrespect to your parents, to your family.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's something that, yeah, I strongly disagree with. It's okay to have nicknames,
yeah,
that's fine. I also have nicknames, but at least make the
yeah,
effort, to pronounce people. That is the basic. Just make an effort to pronounce
yeah,
people's names. Like, yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And you know what? Sometimes it's going to be hard. Like, for example, if you meet Kakamba and you're not used to saying the click, I think put more effort, show the person that you really want to try and say it correctly rather than completely, changing their name or maybe going from Sipo to C4, which means Sipo is gift,
Oh
C4
no.
is a disease. So, and just, just negligently calling the person a
Yeah.
disease. Maybe making a little bit more effort to ask, how do I pronounce it? Attempt. If it's not easy, try, keep trying. Or
Mm.
even understanding that, for example, there's meaning behind every name. It's either,
Yes.
a prophecy or wish or something more
Mm.
intentional. So, yeah, maybe even just leaning
Mm.
into that. And yeah, the nicknames can come after, but it shouldn't be the first resort. Yeah,
Yes. It should not. It should never. It should never be the first resort. Okay. Um. There's something that I wanted to mention. Um. We spoke about names. Um. Yeah. Okay. I think that's about it. Um. Do you have any last words?
hey, I've given all my words now. I have no more English, only Xhosa. But yeah, I think that will be it from my side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to
Okay.
avoid resorting
And
to subtitles. Yes.
okay. Um. So you are the
Mhm.
founder of Eduvanced Tutors. When did you start the company?
Yes. All right. So Eduvance started in 2020 July as Eduvance, but I had been teaching isiXhosa since 2018. So
Okay.
formally as Eduvanced, 2020. Yeah.
Okay, formally 2020. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you've started it and that people can learn isiXhosa. Is it only isiXhosa or is it also Zulu? Like
Hmm?
besides the translation.
Okay, yeah, the language. So mainly we do isiXhosa because we are
Mm,
based in the Western Cape. So initially we started with
mm,
isiXhosa. We wanted to perfect in terms of our courses and our curriculums when it came to isiXhosa conversationally, how we teach isiXhosa academically, and how we do it in terms of translation. So we started with
mm,
isiXhosa, and we basically have course that is running for isiXhosa, and from there we'll start moving on to the next or other languages. The next being isiZulu and so forth. So
mm,
isiXhosa and isiZulu are more widely spoken in South Africa. That was our starting point,
mm.
but we have to be, in order for us to even be true to what we are promoting, we have to be inclusive. We have to go into all South African languages. So
Yes.
yes, isiXhosa was our
Okay.
starting point.
Okay. All right. I also wanted you to speak more about in terms of where can people find you? How can people contact you if they want tutoring?
Mhm. So we have a website, which is www.eduvancedtutors.co.za. You can get on the website, you fill out a form, and then from a form, you'll get contacted about, what services you're looking for and how we can assist. We also believe on the power of social media. So we're on all social media
Mm,
platforms as an Eduvanced underscore tutors on Instagram. We also do post educational content on there. So it's a nice platform. Instagram and TikTok as well. And aside from that, yeah,
mm.
website and social platforms. You should have all our contact details there.
Okay.
But even if you do not, if you're not sure if you're ready to start, give us a call. Let's probably see what we can work with or what you specifically want. Because what we do with our courses, they're all tailored based on why you'd like to learn isiXhosa, your background, and it's all customized along your context, learning style, interests, and so forth. So yeah. There's
Mm,
no rigid formula to say, it's not like traditional learning where there's a textbook and you need to finish this textbook and know all the grammar rules. It's mostly just getting you
mm.
to learn it closer for the context that you want to learn um, in a way and a pace that works for you.
Okay. 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 And have you always been fluent in isiXhosa?
Yes.
Okay.
Always been fluent in isiXhosa. But I think even up until this point, I still educate myself in the language and in the culture
Mm,
up until date. There's so much that
mm,
even as Amaxhosa that we don't know. So yeah,
mm,
I've always been fluent, but
mm,
I'm still aspiring to learn more and more. And usually that's from the older generation or from archives and
mm. Mm. I'm asking because I have a friend who actually wanted to learn more about, she's a Xhosa, and she wanted to learn more about her
Mhm.
language because even in terms of communicating with her siblings, it would be in English. So in the home, they would speak English. When it came to her nieces, they
Mhm.
would speak English. So that was the medium form of communication. So she also wanted her nieces to also
Mhm.
learn the language so that they become familiar with their cultural roots. And for her, it was for her
Yeah,
and her sister, where they wanted to have
yeah,
tutoring because they wanted to stay in touch with their cultural roots because they're speaking English so much and they're around people who aren't necessarily Xhosa. So that's why I wanted to ask, or I wanted to
yeah,
find out whether you've been fluent your whole life, because I know that's not true for everyone.
yeah. I think it's very hard because I'd say I'm fluent my entire life by force because, I come
Mm.
from one of those households whereby, my mother would very sternly say, speak English at school. We know we paid for that, but at home, you're going to speak Xhosa. When we go to family
Mm.
members, you do not speak to old people like in English. They don't understand you. So,
Mm.
in a way,
Mm.
it seemed very harsh then, but it kind of helped. And, I understand why some people don't know how to learn English, and in fact, them realizing that they want to learn Xhosa at a later age is also very much welcome. And we're trying to make it in a
Mm.
setting. For example, she has nieces. It can be a whole family, activity where it's fun. We learn Xhosa, we learn how to communicate in another language, without putting, the pressure or, making it seem like something that is more of damage control. So yeah,
Mm.
we also do
Mm.
that.
Yes. Because even in terms of like we spoke before I started recording in terms of greeting in isiXhosa, where I asked if it's molweni because I'm familiar with molweni,
Yeah.
and then you broke it down and said
Mm.
molweni is when you're greeting a group of people, and molo is when you're greeting one person. And I mentioned the fact that I don't think
Yes.
a lot of people are aware of that. And then you went back to the African meaning of, you can say, of greeting one person in plural is because you're acknowledging their family.
Yeah.
Um, Acknowledging their
Yeah.
family, which is also very important when it comes to learning language, as you said, in terms of context, in terms of one word can have multiple meanings, such as Molweni in
Yeah.
terms of, the greeting many people, where not a lot of
Yeah.
people, if they're not fluent in isiXhosa or don't belong to the tribe, um, aren't aware of that. So that's why tutoring
Yeah.
is important so that we can learn more about the
Mhm.
language and multiple ways of communicating and the reason behind it, which is very important. Just in terms of like greeting someone, in a plural form, it states
Yeah.
it's like an introduction to the culture because already you're like, oh my gosh, they're acknowledging my family, not just me. Like they see me and they see where I come from.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's just a introduction. So learning more
Mhm.
about language is
Yes.
very important, even if you grew up in a household where you spoke the language, but learning more about it is important so you can pass it on to the next generation, um, and they can be fully knowledgeable. Yeah. So it's not only for those
Yes.
that want to learn from scratch, but also those that want to deepen their knowledge, which is also
Yes.
very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yes.
no, I agree with that. 100%. Yes.
So thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was delightful and informative. And thank you
Yeah.
for your services that you provide, not only to South Africa, but globally, because you're available on social media. So your services are
Yeah.
accessible.
Yeah.
So to the listeners, Aviwe provided you with the social media handles on how to contact her and Eduvanced Tutors if you want tutoring to learn a language or to deepen your knowledge on a language. We stated the advantages of being bilingual or multilingual, learning a new language, deepening your knowledge on a language. Um, so, yeah, hopefully it is very useful to you or to somebody that you know. Avi,
I really appreciate how created space to acknowledge things like language and culture. And, having this discussion is very important. So thank you so much for having me here. Um, and yeah, I really appreciate the work that you do in terms of creating awareness, even, which is where
mm,
it starts. So thank you for having me. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for being on the
Awesome.
podcast. Thank you to the listeners for
Thank
listening
you.
to this episode. And until next time, let's keep living with intent. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.